A thin wisp of smoke curled up into the gray early morning sky as young Ahmed pressed his nose against the window's dusty glass. The first rays of dawn touched the rickety rooftops of his neighborhood, a labyrinth of narrow alleyways and crumbling brick walls. Even from this dim vantage point in his family's tiny room, Ahmed could sense the day ahead, heavy with the weight of survival. At 15, Ahmed had learned the meaning of scarcity long before many kids his age. His mother, Maryam, woke hours before sunrise to fetch water from the communal well. His father, Bashir, once a construction worker, now spent days idling at the corner of the street, hoping someone might offer him a day's worth of work. On good days, Bashir would return home with a few coins, enough to buy a loaf of bread, maybe a handful of lentils. On bad days, he'd come home empty-handed, pride etched onto his tired face. Ahmed understood the fear that hovered in his home, a growing dread that the meager savings might run out, that hunger might squeeze in uninvited. But more than fear, he carried a quiet resolve. He had witnessed his parents' exhaustion, the deep lines around their eyes, the whispered midnight prayers Maryam uttered when she believed her children slept. He knew he could not let them down. The morning's chores awaited him. First, he had to buy rationed flour from the tiny roadside shop, then deliver water jugs to a neighbor's household. After that, perhaps, if lucky, he might be able to head to the small local library, a dusty hovel of a place with uneven shelves, chipped paint, and musty pages. Yet to Ahmed, the books were treasures. Each opened a door to a world far beyond the mud-strewn lanes of his neighborhood. He touched the frayed strap of his school bag, empty. The next school term would begin in a few days, but the school fee, uniform fee, and the cost of books were beyond what his parents could afford. Still, he held on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, he could find work, earn a little, and register himself. As he stepped out into the alley, his bare feet crunching on fragments of old bricks and shards of glass, he inhaled the dusty winter air. Across the narrow lane, his friend Sarah greeted him. Though her family also struggled, she had something he didn't, a gentle optimism, a steady attendance at school because her grandmother scraped together enough money to pay the fees. Sarah's uniform was clean, her shoes intact. She offered him a shy smile. "Ahmed," she whispered, "the library opens at 8. Maybe you get in early today." He nodded, placing the water jugs carefully on her doorstep before heading off toward the dusty path that led to the main street. The library building was small, squat, and uninviting, old wooden door, a padlock hanging loosely. Ahmed hesitated, heart pounding. The librarian, a stern but kindly middle-aged man, wasn't always welcoming to boys who couldn't pay the annual membership fee. Sometimes, he'd chase them away or demand a sort of deposit. But Ahmed had visited often enough to know the librarian's routine. He opened the door at 8 sharp, unlocked the padlock, and threw the doors wide. At 8:30, he'd go for tea, leaving the library empty for half an hour. That was when Ahmed came in. Lucky today, the padlock was open. Ahmed pushed the door, almost held his breath. Inside, the air was stale, rays of pale morning light sifted through dusty windows. Yet inside this dimness lay promise, shelves overflowing with old textbooks, poetry books, stories of distant lands, biographies of scientists and leaders. Ahmed's fingers tingled as he chose a battered book with a torn cover, Dreams of Tomorrow. He settled into a stool in the corner, opened to the first page, and began to read. For a few fleeting hours, the outside world, hunger, cold, debt, faded. In its place stood a life filled with possibility, where hard work, knowledge and dreams could push him beyond. He lost track of time. When footsteps echoed outside, he realized it was nearly noon. The librarian returned, nodded but did not speak. Ahmed closed the book gently, tucked it into his bag, and left, heart lighter than it had been at dawn, hope fluttering inside him like a fragile bird. That afternoon, after delivering the water jugs, Ahmed walked to the main street's small cafe, where men hired day laborers for odd jobs. The owner, Mr. Khalid, a stout man with a booming laugh and a kind heart, looked up when Ahmed approached. "Back again, young man?" he asked, wiping his hands on his apron. "Yes, sir. I'm ready if any work, bricklaying, cleaning, carrying goods, whatever you have." The men there exchanged glances. After a moment, one raised a dusty wooden crate. "Carry these sacks to the warehouse 2 streets up." Good money. It wasn't much, but for Ahmed, every coin was precious. Soon he found himself sweating, hauling sacks heavier than he expected. His arms ached, his shirt clung to his back. But he kept going, one step at a time, until the crates were stacked and he was handed 500 rupees. A small fortune. He tucked the money safely into a stitched pocket inside his bag. At home, Mariam would be surprised. They could buy flour for 2 weeks. Maybe a little extra. Maybe even old, torn shoes for Sarah. She loved the ones her grandmother wore, but they were worn thin. That night, the family sat around the small oil lamp, the air heavy with damp cold. The supper was meager, a thin lentil broth, a few doses made from yesterday's flour. But as Bashir spoke of potential jobs, and Mariam gently chided Ahmed to save a bit of that wage, Ahmed's eyes shone faintly with pride. They didn't know yet how far this small wage might carry them. Days passed, weeks, and school reopened. Ahmed's mind swirled with possibilities, but also with dread, the fees. At night, he quietly counted the rupees hidden in a small, rusty tin under his bed. Then came the day he dared to ask. In the small classroom with peeling paint and creaking benches, he approached the teacher after class. His voice was timid. "Sir, I want to join the school, but I don't have the fee or books. Could I start this term, and pay later?" The teacher looked at him with mild surprise. The corners of his lips tightened. For a moment, silence. Then the teacher sighed. "You've been late last term. But I know you. You're honest. Fine, you may join. But you must catch up and show attendance. And no mischief." Ahmed nodded eagerly, relief flooding him. As he walked home, he felt like the boy in the tattered bag was no longer poor, he was just a boy carrying hope. Balancing school, work, and home life was draining. He rose before sunrise, fetched water, delivered jugs, then off to school until midday. Then to the cafe for odd jobs, or to assist in sweeping the street, carrying bricks, loading crates. Sometimes he fell asleep in class, weary from early labor. Once, he tripped carrying a heavy sack, the weight toppled him sideways, scraping his hands and knees. He wiped blood and dust with the sleeve of his shirt, stood up, and carried on. On one particularly cold evening, he returned home late. The oil lamp flickered. His little sister, Farida, stared at him with wide, hungry eyes. Mariam lifted the thin blanket, covering children trembling in the cold. There was little food left, just half a piece of flat bread. Bashir looked exhausted. "No work that day," he said. Nothing came. Ahmed placed his worn satchel on the floor, took the 500 rupee note from his pocket, and offered it. "Here, this will help," he said softly. The room fell silent. Mariam blinked, not trusting her voice. Bashir clasped his hands, as if resisting tears. That night, they ate bread and broth, enough to fill empty stomachs. But something more changed, a flicker of renewed faith. In their son's resilience, they saw a reason to try again. As weeks turned into months, Ahmed began to excel in school. His uniform remained dirty, his shoes patched with threads, but inside, he felt stronger than ever. He devoured books in the library almost daily, mathematics, science, history, worlds opening to him. He asked questions, scribbled notes on scraps of paper, practiced arithmetic with charcoal on rough walls when there was no paper. One afternoon, a teacher came to him with a test paper, the highest marks in class. Ahmed's heart thundered. The teacher told the class he would nominate Ahmed for a scholarship exam. The entire classroom erupted in whispered surprise. Ahmed's feet felt light, as if he walked on air. At home, the old tin under his bed had grown heavier with coins, small collections from odd jobs, from helping neighbors with errands, carrying wood, cleaning yards. He kept the coins hidden with care. Yet even as money accumulated, he held onto his humility. He refused to spend on new shoes or a better bag until he properly earned it, not out of vanity but out of respect for everything he had been through. Then came the week of the scholarship exam. He spent evenings reading by lamplight, hiding under the cotton blanket, turning page after page. His muscles ached less than his mind. He wrestled with math problems, read about geography, literature, ethics. At times, he fell asleep halfway through a chapter. The next morning, he'd wake early and read again. The library was cold, dusty, but he barely noticed. Knowledge warmed him from within. The day of the exam came. The school hall was packed, desks lined up neatly, blackboard chalk dust swirling whenever someone erased. Ahmed sat at the back, his shoes scuffed, bag battered, uniform faded, but eyes burning with focus. He read the questions: mathematics, language, general knowledge. For a moment, doubt crept. Could a poor boy like him answer these? But he took a breath, pressed pen to paper, and started. He worked through algebra problems, calculated carefully, remembered geography maps, history facts. After 2 hours, his hand cramped. But he checked, corrected, rechecked. When the final bell rang, he laid down his pen and exhaled. He thought about his parents' tired faces, his sister's hopeful smile, the dusty path he walked every morning. He did not want to fail, not for himself, but for them. Weeks later, the announcement came. He had passed, with marks high enough to secure a full scholarship. The classroom erupted with cheers, but behind them, whispered admiration. The teacher shook his hand. Even some classmates, who once jeered at his torn bag, now looked at him differently. Hope, it seemed, was contagious. At home that evening, he placed the scholarship letter on the small wooden table under the lamp. The light trembled, but inside the paper lay fire. Maryam gasped, clasped her hands to her mouth, tears rolling silently. Bashir's stoic face softened. For a moment, his proud eyes glistened, old pain forgotten. His little sister jumped up and down, clapping her hands. That night, the family felt something new, a sense of possibility. Days turned into years. The scholarship covered tuition, books, even a small monthly allowance. Ahmed's days became filled with lessons, books, learning. He still worked, but now not out of desperation. He carried small deliveries after class, tutoring younger children in the neighborhood for a few rupees. He saved carefully, bought a pair of sturdy shoes and a simple satchel to replace his old one, but never indulged in luxuries. Every coin reminded him of where he came from. His academic performance remained strong. Teachers noticed something beyond grades, a quiet dignity, a steady perseverance, a calm mind tempered by hardship. He became a beacon for others, children who once thought life destined them for poverty. He encouraged them to come to the library with him, to read, to learn, to hope. One afternoon, as he sat in the library with a group of children gathered around him, reading aloud stories and helping translate difficult words, a man in a crisp suit entered. He looked at Ahmed, then at the children, brows furrowed. "Excuse me," he said politely. "You are Ahmed, right? The scholarship student." Ahmed nodded. The man introduced himself as Mr. Rahim, a manager at a technical institute opening in the city. He had read about Ahmed's results and his background. "We plan to offer full scholarship to students like you, bright, motivated, but without means. Would you be interested in pursuing engineering? We have seats, and we give free accommodations." Ahmed's heart skipped. Engineering, he had dreamt of building roads, bridges, maybe designing water systems so that children wouldn't walk miles for water like he once did. He swallowed hard. "Yes," he said softly. "I would be honored." And so, his journey took a leap. College life was different. Dormitory rooms, new friends, books by the dozens, professors with deep voices, labs full of machines and experiments. Sometimes Ahmed felt out of place. The other students spoke of holidays, trips, phones, new clothes. He still wore patched shoes, simple clothes, carried a second-hand bag. But he carried a conviction stronger than any threadbare shoe: he belonged there. At first, classes were overwhelming: calculus, physics, engineering drawings. More than once he sat up at night, trying to solve complex problems, head pounding. Many times he felt inadequate. Whispers of "poor boy" background would flutter around him, subtle snickers about his accent or his rough hands. But each time, he remembered why he was there. He remembered the water jugs he used to carry, the dusty books in the old library, the hunger that gnawed at his stomach, the cold nights under a threadbare blanket. That memory was his strength. Slowly but steadily, he improved. He asked questions in class, stayed back to help after lectures, tutored juniors, fixed wiring in the dorm where older students refused to touch. Professors noticed: sharp mind, disciplined habits, humble attitude. He earned respect not by flaunting his success, but quietly, by showing up, doing the work, pushing through exhaustion and discomfort. Upon graduation, he was offered a job working with a municipal engineering department, designing water supply systems for underprivileged neighborhoods. For the boy who once carried water jugs from a distant well, this was a purpose written by fate. His parents' pride soared. Bashir stopped loitering at the street corner. Instead, he stood a little taller. Maryam no longer fetched water from the well. Now, clean water flowed into their small home, thanks to her son's work. When neighbors saw the uniform, the modest salary, the improvement in their living conditions, some shook their heads in disbelief, others quietly nodded, eyes shining with respect. Children gathered around Ahmed's door, asking for advice, guidance, books. He opened the old library's doors for them on weekends, donated some of his own traveling-worn textbooks, arranged small reading sessions under the old oil lamp. He told them, knowledge is a ladder. Climb it. One day you'll reach higher than you ever thought possible. Years later, looking back, Ahmed remembered the boy he was, hungry, barefoot, carrying jugs, longing for a school bag, worrying about the next meal. He recalled the pride mingled with shame, the fear that he might drag his family deeper into debt. He understood something powerful: poverty was not a crime, it was a challenge. And challenges can be faced, battled, overcome. Not by magic, but by grit, by resolve, by belief in oneself, by persistence. He carried that belief like a torch, sometimes flickering, sometimes bright, but never extinguished. In every water pipe he laid, every brick he calculated for a school building, every document he signed for a new housing plan, he saw faces, children like him, parents like his, hopes like theirs. He dedicated his work to them. Not for glory, but for dignity. Because once he knew what it meant to lack basics: a uniform, a pair of shoes, clean water, hope. One rainy evening, as heavy drops tapped on the tin roof of his small office, Ahmed sat at his desk. Outside, muddy water pooled in narrow lanes, flooding houses, knocking at doors. Many families would lose food, warmth, shelter. He stared at the plans before him: drainage systems, canals, clean water supply lines. He closed his eyes. He remembered the days he walked through those murky lanes, carrying water jugs under the harsh sun, his feet blistered, his stomach empty, his spirit weary. He remembered the fear of a night without bread, the shame when classmates teased him for worn shoes. He remembered his mother's tired hands, his father's silent resignation, his sister's quiet hope for better shoes. And he thought, I will not let others suffer like that. He picked up the pen, etched new lines, redesigned pipes, redrew canal directions. Outside, rain poured, but inside, in that dim office lit by a single bulb, a different kind of flow began, the flow of hope, of change, of dignity. Because the boy who once carried water jugs had grown to build systems that carried water, electricity, education, opportunity. Because a story that began in poverty ended in promise. And so, the story of the poor boy ends, or rather, transforms. For poverty was not the final chapter. It was only a beginning. A beginning that demanded tenacity, sacrifice, conviction. The boy did not give up. He fought the weight of hardship, the sting of hunger, the taunts of his peers, but never surrendered his dreams. He carried on, step by step, fetching water jugs in dawn light, carrying bricks under scorching sun, turning pages in dusty books, solving equations by lamplight. He climbed, slowly, steadily, until the top of the ladder was no longer a dream, it was his life. Today, many children walk the narrow lanes of his old neighborhood, clutching battered bags, eyes dull with doubt. They might not know his name. But in their hearts, he is a living proof. Dreams can be born in mud-walled homes, hope can survive hunger, education can flourish in dusty libraries, and a poor boy, if he refuses to give up, can change the world around him. So remember this: no matter how narrow the alley, how heavy the burdens, how tattered the shoes, the staircase to a better life begins with the simple act of not giving up. Climb one step at a time. Because one day, you might stand tall, and from there, light the way for many who follows.